I did some leak code, and after a while, I felt I was pretty good at coding. Look at me, top close to 10%. And so when I went into UVA Online Judge and I went inside here, it says getting started, the easy problems. And then there's literally a folder called Super Easy. And I tried to do the very first question inside the super easy questions. And I kept getting wrong answers. I was so sad. And also, you see this accepted. This is not actually my code. I actually, because I was so sad, I looked up the answer and I copied it. I didn't even fully understand how it worked, how the accepted answer worked. I copied it, pasted it, and then it finally wrote accepted. I was really sad. Inputs from, say, Online Judge and Codeforces. I'll say Codeforces is a bit more beginner friendly. They could be tricky. And so, if your job is to first learn about problem solving itself, I recommend first getting better at LeetCode, and because LeetCode has a lot more resources, you could just look it up on the internet. And so today I will be telling you, I don't know other languages how to really solve it, so I'm going to talk about my experience of how to handle these types of inputs as someone who's writing Python code. Starting off with the easiest one, we have this system, I would say standard input, read line, and then strip. So strip just removes the white spaces, I believe, at the end of the line of input. I always use it. Like, there's no reason not to use it. It's just nice safe measures to put it at the end. And so we could see, we just type in whatever, and this is what it reads. And we could actually run it again, so we could see what happens if we have some spaces and stuff. Well, it will just take in the spaces. So it's just this thing you see over here. It's a big string, so it's all in one. It's not three separate things. It is a single string. And now let's say we want to do calculations, so I'm actually going to make two of these, print S1 plus S2. So we're going to say 1 plus 1. It gets us 11 because these are default strings. So if we want to do calculations, we have to put on this integer function so that it converts to an integer. And so now it gets the job done. Next up will be the split function. So if you add split at the back over here, now it splits whatever is in by a white space. So let's just go with this. It separates it by white spaces, and as you can see pretty clearly, these are still strings. And so we'll talk about turning them into integers soon, but I want to mention, let's say if I write it as 19. So what you're seeing here, you will want to separate, if you want to separate it with this comma and space, then if we press enter, it continues to have this comma because it splits it through the white space, and not through comma space. So if you want it to split the way you want it to, you have to write in here that you want to separate it using the comma space. And so we could run it again. Now it gets the job done the way you want to. Next is the map function, and the map function maps out the input. In this case, we will want two, like one input, white space, the next input, and in our case, we want them to both be integers. So the first it takes two parameters to use this map function. The first parameter says what type you want it to be. So it could be a string if you want it to be that, or it could be an integer, which is in a lot of cases what we want. And so we could test this out here. What? I do not understand this, but let's just say 10, 12. So also, this print function is commonly used. If you want to say print something, then white space, then something else, you can use this print function. And as we can see, because it adds it in the correct way, so they are indeed numbers. T1 will be 10 and T2 will be 12. Lastly, if you want to receive a list of numbers, they would usually write it as like a number, white space, the next number, white space, the next number, blah blah. Then all we need to do is have this list function. So we are turning it into a list. And then we can, once again, I I don't fully understand this, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There you go. It turns the input into what we want, which is a list of integers. And so we can do the things we want to do. Let's see what the sum of this is. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. 6. And I believe that these are all of the main functions to receive single lines of input. And then now I'll be going through the three types of problems that you'll be facing: the simple kind, the for loop kind, and the while loop kind. This question over here is what I'll consider a simple question, because you know exactly how many lines of input that you're going to get. So it says the first line contains a single integer, and the second line contains a list of numbers. And so when we code it out, it's really simple, because all you have to do is just make 2 for the 2 lines of input that you are going to get. So the first one is easy. It's just a singular number, so you use this to get that singular number. And then for the list of numbers, remember to use the map function, turn it into integers, and then split it up, and then use it, turn it into a list. Then numbers, this variable, it will now be a list of integers. And then with that, you could do whatever you need to do to get the job done. This over here is a for loop type question. So the main characteristic of this question is that the number of test cases is given in the first line of the input. So for example, here the first input is 5, which means that we'll get 5 either lines of input or 5 recurring units of input that we need to use. So maybe it's 2 lines of input, so it'll be 5, and it'll write 1 line, second line, and then there'll be another 1 line, second line, and you repeat that 5 times. So for our case here, it's just 5 and then 5 single lines of input. And so when you write it out, the first one will pretty much always be like this. So you just grab that number and then you say for I in range, and then you put your number, and so repeat the process 5 times, and then depending on what it wants you to do, this one is really simple, so we just take that single line of string and then we could use it and get the job done. And last but definitely not least, I would say it's actually the most important one, is the while loop variation. So you could see the input will consist of several lines of text, and the input is end. I think there are ways you could catch this end of file characters, but personally my way, it seems to work. For the most part, I have yet to find a question that it doesn't work. So simply, we do not know at all how long this input is going to be. All it's going to do is that at the very end, when all the input is finished, it will give us this end of file character, or of course, because it's the end of its input, you will no longer receive input, or the input will be like nothing. There will be no input for you. And so we use a while loop here. Okay, so it's true we don't need to look at it. What we do here, this is the important stuff. We write while true, so we keep on receiving input. So we keep on grabbing this next line of whatever it is, usually a string, maybe it's something else. Maybe you have like multiple lists of integers and you have, like one line is one test case, and so you have to do one at a time until there are no more test cases. And so we here grab that string that it wants us to use, and then we continue. And then here's of course, the most important part, or while trues will run forever. If s, which is the input that we got, is nothing, we got nothing as our input, then we break out because we do not have input here anymore, and so we can now leave. And that is how you solve these while loop type problems. And I think there are other ways to solve it too. The most common is a try except EOF error strategy, but I just find this to be a lot more intuitive for me. So you just keep on taking in input until you have no more input left. So this is how I solve it, and I think that these three methods can do a lot already. Maybe these 3 are all you really need, because of course the people designing these problems, their job is not to stump you on the inputs. It's actually trying to question whether or not you actually have the power to solve the actual problem. And so these 3, I believe, are good enough to solve most of the questions you'll be facing. These could handle pretty much all the inputs you'll get, and for outputs, print is all you need. I really think just know how to use print, and that'll get the job done. And so thank you, and maybe I'll see you in another video, but get solving, go solve problems. You don't stop watching YouTube for a little while.